All right, guys, here we go. I'll give everyone a little bit of time to kind of come in. Dun, dun, dun. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another webinar, another video. So make sure you guys get your questions in. I'll try to pick some randomly for the next 45 minutes, next hour or so, and we'll just answer whatever questions you guys have about obsessive compulsive disorder, about exposure and response prevention, or about OCD. So you guys, so many, I feel like we've learned in the couple of lives that I've done recently on the Instagram live page, I feel like so many of you guys like follow OCD, or you like are obviously on our YouTube channel and whatnot, but some of you don't realize our app is super cool. And even if you're not getting therapy through OCD, there are so many awesome functions on our free app that you can take advantage of. And that you don't have to necessarily be getting therapy services for in order to kind of benefit. So I guess I'll kind of start by just talking to you guys a little bit more about our app and its functions. That way you can all go right away and you can go and download the app. It's free on the marketplace. And so, yeah, so you guys can, anyone out there, whether you are getting therapy right now in general or not, you again do not have to be part of OCD or getting therapy from OCD in order to have the app or make use of the app or benefit from its features. So free on the marketplace, go and download it. A couple of the features that you'll find on there, we offer free peer support groups, which I think is incredible. As you all know, OCD is already so isolating. The pandemic just obviously adds so much on top of that. So we offer a link where you can access free peer support groups. So these groups are all including people who have obsessive compulsive disorder. The groups are all led by an OCD trained therapist. Well, an OCD therapist who is trained in exposure and response prevention and about OCD. So it's a really great place and a really great resource to get, resources and to just get that peer support from your community, from other people, to kind of hear their stories, to talk about your story a little bit. I've been told that they're just really, really helpful and something that you can't just get other places as easily. So some other functions that you might not know about unless you kind of fish around in the app. We also offer kind of our ERP tools. So we offer a way for you guys to develop and make your own exposure hierarchies, for you to go on and add your own compulsions, your specific rituals that are tailored to you and your specific needs. We have ways that we have other videos that you guys can use, like the SOS function is really great. So the SOS function on there is awesome in case you're really struggling and you're not really sure kind of what to do in the moment, or, how do I resist my rituals? How do I kind of keep up with all of my exposures? What do I do in this really intense moment of anxiety? So there are some good SOS tools on there in case you are really struggling. I believe last time they even had it like divvied up in terms of subtype. So like they have an existential video one, they have one about relationship OCD. So the app again is called OCD. So if you look up OCD, NOCD, or treat my OCD on the marketplace, then you'll be able to find it. So yeah, there's a lot of really great resources on the app. There's also an in-app community. So there are individuals kind of posting on the forum there. You'll also get some feedback from peer advisors. I see Stephen Smith is on there every once in a while, the developer and CEO and the creator of OCD. So yeah, it's a really great app. And again, it's free, no pressure. You do not have to be in therapy through OCD in order to benefit from those. So yeah, it's really awesome. And of course, obviously, if any of you out there are struggling with OCD, then you can also, through the app or on the website, then you can go to www.treatmyocd.com or www.nocd.com, and you can do one of our free 15-minute phone calls, and our care team, who is wonderful, will get you hooked up with a therapist. So that's kind of my spiel lately about the OCD app. I've been hearing that so many people aren't really as aware of our awesome app. And so I feel the need to kind of just let people know about it. So if you have any questions about the app, for sure, let me know. So now we'll get into some questions just from the pages. So should have probably done this before. That's okay. We're rolling with it. So if no one has heard of me, if I'm not familiar, I was here 2 weeks ago on a webinar. So if I'm new to you, then hello. My name is Jenna Overbaugh. I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm licensed in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. I also help treat some of our members in the United Kingdom, which is really, really fun. And yeah, I've been working with people who have OCD and anxiety for 10 or 12 years, and I love no OCD. I love the fact that we make treatment more accessible to people. I love that we work with people who have OCD. I love everything about the treatment for it. And it's just really, really awesome to be part of such a great company with such an awesome, awesome mission. So I'm just going to start to go over some questions. Any tips on helping someone get calm after, I can show, I love this feature. Any tips on helping someone get calm after an unexpected exposure? And one is just identifying that particularly they're struggling with harm OCD. I still have a little bit of lingering anxiety. So one, I know that this can be really difficult. I actually just did an Instagram live. It was supposed to be with Christina. She's otherwise known as the OCD Whisperer. She wasn't able to make it on, so we'll have to do it again and get her feedback on it. But definitely the whole live, it was 30 minutes on how to handle situational exposures. And again, situational exposures are these things that just happen out of nowhere. They're kind of these unexpected things. You can have your own kind of like structured exposures as assignments that you do, but then these unexpected triggers are what are really challenging for people because you kind of just weren't seeing it coming. And they can be tougher in that way. And so definitely head to, and if Juan or anyone else is struggling with this idea of what to do after these unexpected exposures, definitely go to the Treat My OCD Instagram page and check out the most recent Instagram live that I did. So it'll have been downloaded and recorded. So you can go and it'll go super in depth about kind of how to respond to your anxiety in those situations and some other tips and tools that you can use in those situations. But one, something that stands out to me is you're asking kind of how do I get calm after an unexpected exposure? And I want to avert you away from the concept of like, how do I get calm? How do I get calm? How do I get calm? Because I think when it comes to anxiety and panic, and when it comes to obsessive compulsive disorder, the more that you want calm, the less calm you're actually going to be. And so I think unexpected exposures like this and the concept of like, how do I get calm? I think it can kind of be like quicksand. So I would encourage you, instead of trying to get calm, like I need to do this coping skill to get calm, I need to do this, I need to distract to get calm, I would encourage you to just continue to go about your normally scheduled routines, continue to engage in the present moment, continue to engage in your normal valued activities while you're anxious. I know that that's kind of a counterintuitive process and counterintuitive concepts to a lot of people. But that's this exposure happened, the situational exposure happened. I think the most important piece there is going to be that response prevention with, exposure and response prevention. And so what I would encourage you to do is to not necessarily try to fight for that calm to happen and not try to force it, and rather continue to just go about your day as much as you can and as normally as you can. And I think you'll find in a more passive sense, you will become calm by not continuing to give this exposure attention, by not analyzing the situation, and certainly not by ritualizing. So two really key concepts here is one, that you are not giving any more attention to these intrusive thoughts or whatever it is that happened. You're not trying to analyze the situation. So you're not trying to figure anything out. You're not trying to figure out like why you had those thoughts or what does it mean about you, or are you going to have more in the future? So just allowing all those questions to be there without trying to answer them. And then continuing to engage in your values. If before this unexpected trigger, you were going to come home and watch TV and maybe finish some homework, just as an example, I would encourage you to continue to do that, especially because you're anxious. not just even when you're anxious. I think it's important to continue to do those valued activities, especially when you're anxious, because it sends the message to the OCD that I might be a little bit anxious right now, and that's okay. I don't need it to go away right now. I'm okay with all of the emotions that exist. All emotions are okay. I don't need to necessarily problem solve this right now actively. I don't need to necessarily ritualize right now to get it to go away. I'm okay with feeling anxious right now because I'm still going to go and do all the things that I want to do. And I think by allowing that anxiety to be there without attacking it or perceiving it as being threatening somehow, you will naturally, as you continue to engage in the rest of your evening, you will find that that calm passively finds its way to you. I'm hopeful that that made sense. And I'm sure a lot of people out there totally can relate to this. I'm sure tons of people here have had a situational exposure within the past hour. You know, those little things happen and they can really have the tendency to throw you off of your game, but they certainly don't have to. What are some other ones? Dun, dun, dun. Trying to find, hi Mario. I love seeing people who I remember from groups. It's so wonderful. Okay, Michelle, this is a good question. Any advice on listening to loop tapes? I feel like I can't get anxious. So for those of you who aren't aware, this is a function on our app and it is used for exposure purposes. So a loop tape is essentially something that it's an audio. So something that you listen to again and again and again and again and again as an exposure to evoke some anxiety and to essentially give you guys practice to practice ritual prevention. So let me think of an example. So let's say that I had anxiety about driving. Loop tapes are helpful when you can't actually make something happen, or when there's an intrusive thought that's just really sticky and it's around all the time and you kind of you want to get rid of it, but essentially what we want to do is just oversaturate your brain and have you think about it and hear it and listen to it all the time. So let's say that I was really anxious about driving. Obviously I could do in vivo or real life exposures about driving, but I could drive on a back road without checking. I could, look away while I change the temperature in the car really quickly without checking my rearview mirror. I could do all those exposures. I could watch a video of a car accident. I could listen to audio of a car accident. I could do all those in vivo exposures. But I can't actually get into a car accident. Maybe that happens, but I can't make that happen. And so loop tapes can be helpful. I use them a lot when we're doing exposures that I can't necessarily make happen, like a plane crash or something like that. Getting arrested, whatever. So loop tapes, essentially, what we would have people do is we would have people kind of like work on writing a script. So writing out like a detailed narrative in varying levels of detail, kind of their worst case scenario. Like I am in the car on my way home from work. All of a sudden I hear the person's brakes and tires squeal behind me, and I feel this sudden jerk of a crash coming from behind. And so let's say that was like my medium detailed script of my fear of getting in a car accident. I would then take that script and I would then use my audio. I would use my loop tape function on the NoCD app, and I would say that, and the loop tape would record it, and then the exposure would be for me to listen to that loop tape again and again and again and again on repeat, maybe like 15 or 20 times, however long it takes for my anxiety to come down by half. It could also be a simple loop tape as far as like, I may go to jail today. I may go to jail today. I may go to jail today. Maybe today is the day that I go to jail. And so this is just to give people who aren't as aware of kind of what a loop tape is. So for those of you out there who do have loop tapes, sometimes you listen to them again and again and they kind of get boring and you habituate to them. You learn that you can tolerate it and it's just not it's no longer anxiety provoking for you. So there are some ways or some things that I would ask. Like if a member at NoCD was saying that a loop tape just wasn't making them anxious, I would ask first and foremost, are you ritualizing? So I would ask first things first, like, I want to make sure that you're not ritualizing. I want to make sure that you're not tuning out. I want to make sure that you're not trying to like white knuckle the situation. I want to make sure that you're not doing anything mental, any mental compulsions. I want to make sure that you're not like self-assuring yourself or kind of disconnecting from it in any way. I want, as best as you can, to identify for me that you are not ritualizing, because if you're just straight up not anxious, that's one explanation for it, right? Another explanation for it is that it's just not triggering enough for you. Like, it's just, you know, you're doing everything that you think you can, but maybe it's just not that anxiety provoking for you. And that's okay. I think that happens. And one thing that you can do to make a loop tape a little bit more anxiety provoking is you could just make it more detailed, right? So instead of, you know, having a 3-sentence long narrative, re-recording the narrative and having it be a page long, right? Like, just by nature of you making it more detailed, it will be more anxiety provoking because there's more detail there, and your brain is, it's going to be interpreted as more vivid, right? Because it has more detail. So one way too that you can make things more detailed, if you're kind of curious, you know, if you're like stuck like me with writer's block and you're not really sure how to make this more detailed, ask yourself about the 5 senses. So what do I smell during this event? Like, maybe you smell the dust from the airbag. What do you see? Maybe you see shattered glass when you open your eyes. What do you hear? What do you feel? What are you thinking? What you know, what are you tasting? Maybe you taste a substance in your mouth that you don't like after a car accident. And so, yeah, trying to find ways to just lengthen the loop tape can be really helpful as far as making you more anxious, being more detailed as far as the 5 senses go. And then the last suggestion I would have is to incorporate your thoughts and your feelings, making sure you could always include things like, I am feeling really scared right now. My heartbeat is racing from my chest. So you can always add those like physiological sensations too to make it more realistic. And you can always add the thoughts that you're having. I would, last suggestion here, try to make sure that you make them, if you're doing like a long detailed script like this, like a longer narrative, make sure that you end it uncertain in some way. So again, obsessive compulsive disorder hates uncertainty. So as long as you can end it in an uncertain kind of fashion, then you'll be better off as far as like trying to make yourself as anxious as possible. And then there is the final explanation, which is that loop tapes just aren't effective for you. I've kind of worked with, I've worked with a lot of people where loop tapes are super effective, and that seems to be like what they need to work on the most in therapy. But I've certainly worked with other people who they just can't really get themselves there. It just doesn't really do much for them, and we're better off just focusing on really good quality in vivo exposures. So yeah, hopefully that answers your questions. Loop tapes are a great tool. Definitely, first and foremost, if you're not getting anxious during a loop tape or during any exposure, make sure that you are not ritualizing. Make sure that you're not doing anything to kind of make your anxiety feel better. Make sure you're not doing anything to kind of cope with the situation. You truly just want the passing of time to be the only reason why your anxiety has come down. And then you can kind of launch into those other explanations or other ways of making the loop tape a little bit more descriptive. All right. Going on a date this week with a girl I really like, and I can't stop thinking about, what if I say something that won't make her like me? What if she doesn't like me? What's a good way to approach it? And so I do think that this is something that a lot of people can relate to, right? So whether it's a romantic relationship, dating, whether it's a new friendship, whether it's a job interview, any kind of new situation that you value, your OCD is going to potentially want to latch onto that. And so, I don't know that it matters as much as it is that the fact that this is going to be with a potentially romantic partner, a date. I think, the advice that I'm going to give you, Ale, is going to be the same for anyone who's struggling with these types of rituals. Like, they do a lot of what ifs. They try to like perfect their conversations. They kind of do that like forward thinking rumination type of business where they try to plan and prepare. So first things first. I know that it's hard to do this, right? Like you're all amped up, you're kind of excited, you're nervous about this date, obviously, and there's a lot of unknowns, right? Like there's a lot of uncertainties when someone else is involved. A new date is scary for a lot of people. And so I would encourage you to consider that this date is probably going to be anxiety provoking. Like no ritual that you do, no amount of what if thinking, no amount of rumination that you engage in as far as this date goes is going to make you feel better, right? I know it doesn't feel like that in the moment. In the moment, I know it feels like I have to do it. It's going to make me feel better. I'm going to prepare. So I would encourage you to really take a look at the justifications that you have for this type of behavior, to answer the what ifs and to try to rehearse what it is that you're saying and to try to play through all these different scenarios. There are probably 3 justifications that you could come up with for this behavior, right? That 1, it makes you feel better. 2, that it helps you problem solve. Or 3, it somehow prevents something bad from happening. So let's break all 3 of those justifications down. So 1, it helps me feel better. Does it? Right? Like I know in the moment, anyone who's engaging in this type of behavior, they feel like it makes them feel better in the moment. But I would challenge you to challenge that and encourage you to consider, like, does it actually make me feel better? Probably not, right? It probably ends up just making you feel worse. So try to debunk that justification right there. It does not actually make you feel better. The second justification normally for this type of behavior is that you feel like it helps you solve a problem. We have to identify the difference between what this is and what actual problem solving is. So what you're engaging in will never generate any new solutions for you. Therefore, it's not problem solving, right? So even if in the moment it feels like it's solving some type of problem, it's not. So it's never going to generate any new information. If anything, it's going to just generate more potentially catastrophic situations that could happen, which is going to lead to you feeling more anxious and more depressed and more unsure about the date in the first place. Okay? So it's not actually problem solving. Problem solving would be active. Rumination like this is just cyclical. It's what if, what if, what if, what if, what if. Problem solving is active. Okay? So it's forward thinking and it's structured and it's short-lived. Rumination is you're solving problems that aren't problems yet. So give yourself permission to solve a problem when that problem occurs, if that problem even occurs, right? And then the third justification for these types of issues is that it prevents something bad from happening, right? So if I just think about what to say, then I'll know that she won't like that, right? Like if I just think about what to say and if I rehearse it and then I'll know what to say. So these types of behaviors lead you to think that you're going to be more confident in what you do and what you say. But by engaging in these behaviors, research shows that it actually makes you more unsure about what to do and what to say. So I think in my last webinar, I talked about a study that was done. It was on individuals who repeatedly check like their locks and their stoves with OCD. And so these individuals, they did a big research study about the number of times that they engaged in a checking behavior with their hair straighteners, their stoves, their doors, their locks, whatever. So it was like this covert checking behavior that they were studying. But so basically they studied and they identified that as these individuals continue to increase their number of checks, as they check 4 times, 8 times, 50 times, 100 times, you would think that as they continue to check, that the confidence in their memory would go up. Like, oh yeah, I checked this 100 times. Obviously, I should be more sure of myself. Obviously, I should be more confident in my memory because I checked this 100 times. Obviously, I should be more confident in my memory because I checked it 100 times versus only checking it once. The opposite is actually true. And so they've done research to suggest that as you continue to engage in this checking behavior, you actually become more unsure. You actually become more uncertain and you become less confident in your memory. And so even though that was with covert checking behaviors, and even though that was with things like the doors and the locks and hair straighteners and stoves and whatever, you're engaging in the same type of behavior here. You're essentially trying to just review or check in your mind. And you have the intention of becoming more confident in your social abilities, making sure that you don't say something stupid. And it probably feels like in the moment, and it makes intuitive sense that as you continue to do that, that somehow you'll be better prepared for the conversation, or that you'll be more confident in conversation. But I promise you, research shows time and time again that that's actually the opposite of what's going to happen. So as you continue to ruminate and try to plan or prepare for this, it's going to lead you to be less confident in your conversation on this date. It's going to cause you to be more anxious, more depressed, and that's going to come out potentially in the date, right? So my best advice as far as how to approach it is to recognize when you have that thought coming up, like, what if that date doesn't go well and she doesn't like it? You can't help that what if. That is but a thought. That is but an instantaneous thought. It takes but a millisecond. What if this happens? What if I say something embarrassing? I want you to try to catch that. And everything else after that, any analyzing, any giving it attention, any trying to problem solve, any trying to feel better about a situation that hasn't happened yet, I don't want you to do any of that. I want you to just truly allow yourself to have had that thought that popped up, that what if question, and I want you to move on and walk on with the rest of your day with that doubt. I don't want you to try to answer any of that question. And give yourself permission to solve problems when and if that happens. So again, like, let's say that you're on the date, and if you're anything like any of us, you may say something that you're not 100% sure of, or that wasn't 100% wonderful and well-suited and perfectly timed for conversation. If the worst case scenario happens and this person doesn't call you back, or the date doesn't go well, then you can problem solve that in the moment. Maybe you reach out and you apologize, or maybe you reach out and go on another date, right? Like, give yourself permission to solve problems if and when they become problems. Good question. I am obsessed with people talking about me and judging me. How can I do exposure and response prevention? So with only knowing one sentence worth of context, which I know is hard, you can't really put much else in there, so it's totally fine. I would ask you, what are some of the safety behaviors that you engage in? So that's where I usually start with members, is what are the safety behaviors that you do? So, and what are your core fears, right? Like what's the concept? What are the perceived consequences? What are the perceived fears when it comes to people talking about you and judging you? So is it that you're going to be this like social outcast? Is it that you're going to be alone forever? Is it that someone's going to be talking about you behind your back and you're not going to know, and that doesn't feel good? And so I would encourage you to just reflect on that a little bit and try to identify kind of a little bit more deeply where that's coming from. And then second piece, ask yourself, what are the safety behaviors that you engage in? I wonder, just based on this limited information, are you engaging in some reassurance seeking? Like, are you asking people around, like, if they talked about you, or if you heard anything, or making sure that they didn't judge you? When you walk away from a social situation, are you trying to maybe like review that in your head to determine how that went, or make sure that it was okay? There are lots of things that you could do. My dog is coming up to say hi. There are lots of things that you could do that I would imagine someone doing when it comes to this type of fear or this type of obsession. So just ask yourself, when I'm anxious about these things, what are the things that I feel like I need to do? What are the things that I feel like I have to do so urgently to fix the situation that maybe temporarily make me feel better, but in the long term just make me a lot more anxious? So once you kind of know the fear or the fears, and once you know the safety behaviors or the rituals or the compulsions that you engage in, there's usually a lot of avoidance as well. I think everyone engages in avoidance, even me. So avoidance is usually at least one of the for sure go-tos for people if you're having a hard time identifying a ritual or a compulsion. So my advice from that point, once you've identified the fear or the fears, and then the rituals, compulsions, safety behaviors, all kind of synonymous as far as what I think anyway, I would then start to, gradually put yourself in those situations where you are more likely to be talked about or judged. So I would ask yourself too, like, what are the situations that I normally avoid? Is it speaking up in conversation? Is it sharing an opinion about something? So maybe that's a good example. So sharing opinions are usually a good situation where there's potential for people to talk about you, to judge you. So maybe you share your opinion about something more silly at first, right? Like you share your favorite store, like you just drop an opinion in conversation. Maybe you work towards more gradually sharing opinions about things that are a little bit more controversial, like your political beliefs or who you voted for president, things like that. And so I would just encourage you to put yourself in situations where you are more likely to be talked about or judged. Chances are you're probably holding yourself back from doing a lot of things because of that fear. And so just literally writing out a list of all the things that you're kind of holding yourself back from, even if it's as silly as, or as simple rather, as like speaking up in conversation or going out of your way to introduce yourself to someone, making sure that you are identifying like these problem hot areas for you. What are the things that you avoid, or what are the ways that you kind of play small to avoid people talking about you and judging you, and then going out of your way to do those things and not engaging in those rituals afterwards. So sharing an opinion in conversation and then not reviewing that conversation afterwards and not seeking reassurance about whether or not they're judging you, not saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter. If they judge me, then it's no big deal. Like maybe they are judging me, maybe they're not. I don't know. And I'm not going to try to figure that out, because the reality is that I'm not safe from being judged or talked about. My husband isn't safe from being judged or talked about. Everyone in this stream right here is not immune to that happening, right? So just like you're not immune to that happening and that those things could happen to you, you could be talked about and you could be judged. That could happen to me. It could happen to literally anyone else who's here. Everyone else who's on earth could be a victim of that. That could happen to people. It's just that somehow your compulsions make you feel like if I do this, if I play small, if I avoid, if I review conversations in my head, then somehow I'm safe. And I wish that were true, but it's not. So, it's a matter too, regardless of the subtype or regardless of the fear, regardless of the compulsions, realizing that everyone is vulnerable to that fear. It's usually a lot of the times it's not even really an obsessive compulsive type of fear. It's a human shared experience type of fear, like fear of something bad happening to you, fear of a loved one, fear of losing control. Usually it's a fear that we can all, as a human like population, we can all share and relate to. It's just that we don't engage, we meaning people who don't have OCD, we don't engage in the ritualistic behaviors or the compulsive behaviors to try to somehow put our world on a tilt for that fear, right? So again, I'm not immune to judgment. I'm not immune to people talking about me. That's not necessarily a Hava fear or an OCD fear. That's a normal shared human experience. What is OCD and what is ritualistic and problematic are the compulsions that you do around that. So the avoidance, the mental reviewing of scenarios and of conversations and all of that. And so it's really a matter of, no longer playing small, doing the things that you want to do, doing the things that you value. Asic. My dog had a lot to say. He's usually so quiet. And making sure that you just live a values-driven life. Come here, buddy. I'll be back. I'll be back with some really good answers to questions. Give me 2 seconds. Come on. Go upstairs. Maybe the Amazon guy came super late or something. He does not like the Amazon guy. Or woman. Or they. Alrighty. So, yes. So we have lots of people here. Just lots of encouragement going on right here. You guys are awesome. Alrighty, trying to get in some last minute questions. We're already like halfway done, you guys. My goodness, time flies. Dun, dun, dun. Is it possible that ruminating makes you engage with your intrusive images more and can they make it more vivid? Absolutely. So, I've talked a lot in previous answers to previous questions about how rumination can make you less confident in your memory. I've talked to you about how it can make you more anxious and make you more depressed. And so, yeah, another one of those reasons and one of those other kind of difficulties about rumination is that it can really just mess with your memory. So If any of you have ever been interested before or taken any like forensic psychology courses, you know probably that a lot of the things that happen like in the judicial system, as far as like eyewitness testimony and stuff goes, like it's not really reliable. Because memory in the mind is, it's really, really vulnerable is what I'm trying to say. So, for instance, you can, you know, if I take one person and I have them identify how fast was that car moving, they may say 30 miles an hour. If I ask the same person, how far was that, or how fast was that car crashing, they might say 60 miles an hour. So their interpretation of the events is very, very skewed based on kind of how I framed that question. In one scenario, because I said moving, they've said 30 miles an hour. In another scenario, I'll say crashing, and they'll interpret it as having gone faster. It's the same clip, it's the same video, but they will overwhelmingly change their answers based on like the simple words that we use. And so I think that just goes to show like our minds are very vulnerable to small missteps of information. And so, yeah, absolutely. Ruminating can totally make your intrusive images more vivid. It can make them feel more real. And so I would encourage all of you to try, I know I've said it before, but try to call out the justifications that you have for your rumination. And I truly think that that's the first step as far as breaking free from it and choosing not to engage in that behavior. You know, I know that pull initially is to try to ruminate, to try to feel better about something, to try to put pieces together. But I always tell my members at OCD, when I kind of bring them through the psychoeducation process, when I am in that first session and I'm talking to them about OCD and I'm talking to them about exposure and response prevention, keep in mind, you know, our brains are really creative. Our brains are the same brains that created the plane before there were airplanes. Our brains are the same brains that created the iPhone 57 or whatever the heck we're on now. Our brains can do really creative things. Our brains can imagine things that don't exist yet so that we can make these wonderful creations and these wonderful inventions. Our minds can also create things that are not so pleasant, right? Like we have nightmares, we have intrusive thoughts, we have things that don't always make sense and that aren't always really pleasant or consistent with our values. So I would encourage all of you to try to recognize when you're ruminating, try to acknowledge the justification that you're having for it in that moment, and try to choose differently. Try to choose to let that ritual go. Try to sit with that uncertainty as much as you possibly can. And know that that sitting with uncertainty takes practice. It is not something that just comes easy to you and it's like, okay, cool, I'm sitting with uncertainty, everything is good now. It takes practice. It's going to take a lot of diligence. It's going to take a lot of practice and consistency, but it's totally possible. But in order to get over these things, in order to get over these intrusive images, we will have to have you go through it, right? So instead of, avoiding it, instead of avoiding whatever it is that you're avoiding, having you go through it in order to get over it is really the key. Here's another good one from Josh. Can OCD get triggered by chronic stress like a pandemic, even if you never had any symptoms in your life before the stressful event? So I'm sure, again, that you're in great company, unfortunately. So yes, the short of all of this is that yes, OCD can get triggered by chronic stress. It can be triggered by something like the pandemic. The pandemic I can't even tell you the ways that it has negatively affected and impacted the OCD community, both people who have never really struggled before the pandemic and people who were doing really, really great. And now all of a sudden they're kind of experiencing a lapse or a relapse because of the pandemic. I will be careful here to say, though, that I don't think there's no cause of OCD. So it's not like the pandemic caused your OCD. It's not that a trauma caused your OCD. There's nothing that really causes OCD. We find that people are generally born with a genetic predisposition for OCD. So, usually there's some underlying features existing in the family, but essentially that we're all kind of, if you have OCD, then you are kind of having this genetic predisposition is what we would call it. And that doesn't mean always if you have a genetic predisposition that light switch is going to flip on. For some people it does, for some people it doesn't. For the people who it does flip on, that could develop into OCD in varying levels and various forms. There's not really a way to tell. But yeah, stressors, trauma can all kind of flip that light switch on, but it's not that any one thing can cause OCD to happen. So if someone out there is developing OCD and it does feel like it was kind of, it just kind of came in out of nowhere, chances are that it was always kind of underlying. Maybe it was more generalized anxiety, maybe it was something else. But chances are that it was kind of underlying there somewhere, and a stressors, chronic stress, a pandemic, so on and so forth, kind of turned that light switch on. That is to say that's the exception to that would be pandas. So it's an autoimmune disorder that's associated, not autoimmune. I forget the acronym for it right now. But PANDAS, let me look it up for you guys. PANDAS is when, this is the example of when someone would really kind of suddenly, we see it sometimes that they just wake up out of nowhere and they really feel like all of a sudden I have OCD. And these are the individuals who their parents are like, yes, my child literally woke up and they were a different person. So I lied. It is an autoimmune disorder. So PANDAS is short for pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections. So this is when someone, usually a child, has like a strep infection, and they end up developing really kind of a sudden onset of obsessive compulsive symptoms. So I believe we talked about that in a live recently with Dr. Farrell. So if you need more information about that too, that's in a previous live webinar that I did here with Dr. Nick Farrell. So you would be able to find more information about that. But long story short, yes, could definitely be triggered by chronic stress like the pandemic. And I like, Josh, that you used the word triggered, not that it was caused. It says there's no one cause of OCD. How do I stop washing my hands so much? I wash way too much after using the bathroom. So this is one really common struggle with people who have OCD. And so the advice that I'm going to give, again, I want to give kind of more just general ritual prevention advice to anyone out there, not just with hand washing, but this is a really good hand wash. I mean, it's easily applicable to hand washing, as you'll see. So as much as possible, I think, how do I stop ritualizing, right? Like, I would start first by identifying your triggers. It seems like, Joel, you've already identified one, after using the bathroom. So next time you go to use the bathroom, I would try to have a counter strategy. Anxiety has a strategy. Anxiety is going to make you have a lot of intrusive thoughts, make you feel gross, make you feel dirty, make you feel like you need to wash your hands. And so for the next time that you go into the bathroom, I would encourage you to have a counter strategy. I would encourage you to kind of plan in advance. Like, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to feel really dirty, as I usually do. And this is what I'm going to be tempted to do. I'm going to be tempted to wash my hands for 5 minutes with 8 pumps of soap under scalding hot water, and I'm going to want to wash all the way up to my elbows. It could be way more than that. It could be way less than that. I'm just giving an example. So what you could do instead is you could reduce that. So there are lots of ways that you could reduce that hand wash. So take what you normally would do that would typically kind of like fulfill the OCD's needs, or like fulfill the OCD's wants and desires 100%. And then I want you to try to find a way to reduce that ritual so that you're not challenging it 100%. So again, whether this is hand washing or checking or, driving the same route again and again, or mentally reviewing in your head, you guys try to find a way that you can reduce that ritual somehow. So with hand washing, you could reduce it by maybe not washing as much surface area. So instead of washing all the way up to your elbows, maybe you wash just to your wrists. Maybe instead of using scalding hot water, you use cold water. I would encourage you to find other ways that you can kind of like fluster the OCD's feathers. So you're still washing. Maybe it's too hard for you to not wash at all, to resist that ritual completely. So you would probably have to play around first and foremost with just reducing that ritual. So I would encourage you to do things, like using less soap, setting a timer. Like, I'm only going to wash my hands for 1 minute, and know that your intention is to not satisfy the OCD. Your intention is to walk away still feeling uncertain. Your intention of that reduced hand wash is to walk away and not feel 100% clean. You're going to feel wrong, right? Like, you're going to feel like you've done something wrong. And so just knowing that in advance, I think, like, having that as a counter strategy, then it won't feel so jarring when you're in that situation and it feels like you're doing something wrong. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep washing. And then it's kind of like a failed attempt and you lose your confidence that way, right? So I would encourage you and anyone else out there struggling with, like, how do I stop rituals? Have a counter strategy. Go into a trigger. Your OCD is going to have a strategy, so you need a counter strategy. Walk yourself through what you would normally want to do and try to ask yourself, okay, how can I make that less fulfilling? My job is to make that ritual not as fulfilling. I need to find a way to kind of just fluster his feathers a little bit, because I want you all to think of this as long as you guys are ritualizing, you're feeding the beast. So, and as long as you feed the beast, it shall live. So as long as you are washing your hands, you're continuing to feed that beast. And so, maybe you don't starve the beast right away. That's obviously ideal, but a lot of times that's too difficult for people. And that's why you guys need help, right? Like, that's why, therapists exist and this guidance exists. It's not supposed to just be that easy to just resist doing everything. And so if you're not able to just starve the beast completely and resist completely, then what we could do is we're just not going to give them a steak dinner, right? Like, we're not going to give them their steak dinner anymore. We're not going to give them the steak dinner and the buttered potatoes and the dessert. Like, we'll give them a cheap, like, gas station bag of chips, right? Like, okay, that's kind of the equivalent of, okay, yeah, I need to wash my hands right now. Like, I don't want to have to do this forever, but I'm going to do it just to kind of move on with the rest of my day. And I'm not going to give into the OCD. I'm not going to give it 100% of what it wants, because I call the shots. So find a way that you can reduce the ritual, find a way that you can make sure that that beast is not getting everything that it needs. Make sure that you can find a way to reduce that somehow, to kind of just fluster its feathers a little bit and make sure that you're starting to take away some of that food. So I will take one more question and then I'm going to call it a night, you guys. I am an early bird and kind of old in that I go to bed at like 7:30. So this is like a wild night for me, y'all. A wild night for me. So, does OCD, last question, does OCD come in waves? Because there are certain times of the year when it really bugs me. Yeah, so the nature of OCD is that we call it waxes and it wanes, which means that there will be some times where it's really, really bad, and there will be some times where for no reason it seems like it's just fine. And so I think a lot of people could relate to that. I think a lot of people would say that that's their experience with their OCD as well, that it kind of waxes and wanes. What I do know, though, is that it doesn't really ever go away. It never really goes away unless you do the behavioral treatment for it. So unless you are actively engaged in exposure and response prevention, which is the gold standard treatment for OCD, and that's what we provide here at NoCD, that it will continue to wax and wane. It'll continue to wax and wane, but it will continue to come back. And sometimes it can come back kind of with a vengeance. So just being very aware of that yeah, there may be times where you feel like it's not that big of a deal and maybe it's gone. And I hope that that's the case. I wish that could be the case, but generally in my professional experience and in my just clinical research experience, that is generally not the case. That you definitely would need some exposure and response prevention, because anxiety is not going anywhere, right? Like, intrusive thoughts aren't going anywhere. We all have anxiety. We all have intrusive thoughts. And what we need to work on is not getting rid of that anxiety, not getting rid of those intrusive thoughts, but rather having a different relationship with us, having a different relationship with the anxiety, having a different relationship with the OCD, so that we can learn to manage it and learn to respond to it in different and more functional ways. So I saw someone say that they are in Canada, so they don't have access. So we are working on Canada. So, I mean, literally we are working on getting therapists there. we are able to go as soon as we are able to find therapists who we believe to be highly trained and equipped to deal with OCD. We don't want to pull the trigger until we find professionals who are able 100% to do EARP. We just feel really strongly about the standards that we have here for therapists. And so as soon as we can find individuals who are ready to go and rock and roll as far as exposures go, then we will be accessible in Canada. So that's all I've got for tonight, you guys. Like I said, continue to check out our Treat My OCD page on Instagram. I have been doing a lot of lives recently, so lots of good educational information on there. Download our NoCD app. Go to the Marketplace, make sure that you download the NoCD app. If you can't find it under NoCD, then check out Treat My OCD. Go to www.treatmyocd.com if you guys need any more assistance as far as therapy goes. And at the very least, I urge all of you to download the NoCD app. Check out the peer support groups. They are wonderful. Lots of really great opportunities for social support. And like I said, they're all led by a NoCD therapist. So not just awesome opportunities for social support, but really good kind of educational basic skill building type of stuff. But really good to see all of you guys. Maybe one of these days I'll be back. So it was so nice to talk to you all. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to all of the questions, but maybe one day I'll be back. All right. I wish you all the best of luck, and reach out to us if you guys have any additional questions about OCD, about exposure and response prevention. I'm over on Instagram at jenna.overbaugh, just my name with a period in between. So come over, come find me. Lots and lots of Instagram lives, like I said, in between my page and the Treat My OCD page. So I'm sure I will see you guys soon. Bye.